a pleasure to be here and have an opportunity to meet people who care about effective altruism. About 3 years ago, I think while I was doing a lot of quarantine, sitting with myself stuck in a room, I realized that maybe I should do a little bit more with my research. So I've done quite a few things with my students in regards to open science and collaborative science and large team science. But then it's more the way that we do stuff at HKU, so it's more us sitting in a room punching the keyboard. And I realized I would like to have a bit more impact. I would like to know what people are doing in Hong Kong, but generally around the world, in order to do more good and do good better. So I didn't really know what that meant, but I've heard of effective altruism, and I've read some books and listened to some TED Talks, and I realized that I want to know this better. So the way that I usually do things, that if I want to learn them, then I decide to teach them. So I decided to change all of my courses in order to realign from just doing open science and meta science, large team science, to also trying to do more about effective altruism. So today I'll try and share a little bit with you about many activities. I try different things. So every semester I decide on one small implementation, and then I try and see what works, and then based on that I try and build on the upcoming semesters later on. So first time I tried things was last year, revamped my courses, did things with the thesis students, and this is the second year. So we've tried a bunch of other things. So I'll share a little bit of that with you. So it's more of a journey of exploration to tell you a little bit what we're doing, and trying to tie academic research, a lot of geekiness, into real life stuff, things that have impact, potential for impact. So I'm presenting you with a choice between two charities, and you can decide how much to allocate. Suppose that you have a certain budget, and you need to allocate money between charity A and charity B. Which one of those two charities will you prefer? So I'll just read this out for you as you're going through your mobiles. I'll just say what this reads out. Charities A and B both help prevent deaths in children. Both of them can prevent 5 deaths for every $1,000 of donations. But there is one thing that charity A and charity B differ on. Charity A spends $200 out of every $1,000 on advertising, whereas charity B spends $100 out of the $1,000 donations on advertising. So how would you allocate whatever the donation is between charity A and charity B when the scale is from 0% to 100% going to charity B? Okay, so that's the first question. And the second example is charities A and B both save lives with the same effectiveness, so they have the same life saved per dollar spent. And then charity A publishes the names of the donors and how much they donated on their website, and charity B keeps the donors anonymous. So which one would you prefer, charity A or charity B? And then suppose to have a scale that allocates between charity A and charity B. So think in your minds, what is the allocation that you would prefer to do here? And this is actually academic research that we've conducted. So I've done this. Alex was one of the first to take my courses last year when I revamped everything to do things about effective altruism. And he came afterwards and said, I want to do a thesis on effective altruism. What can we do? So we chose an academic article, a chapter in a book that was published in 2011. And then we did a whole process with this, and we submitted the thesis to peer review. And finally, it was endorsed by something called Peer Community in Register Reports. And a few weeks ago, I think some of you attended, he gave a talk at HKU where he summarized everything, all of his insights. So we tried many of these comparisons between charity A and charity B. And here are some of the things that we found. So this one, the first one, I hope you can see that, but it's about overhead and advertising. So the difference between these two is how much of the $1,000 is allocated to donations, of the donations allocated to advertising. So $200 in charity A and $100 in charity B. How would people allocate between these two? So here's a very small small summary of the whole thing. What you can see here, I'll just read it out to you, is between an allocation of 0 to charity B to 100% charity B. And typically, if people have no preference, they would allocate things to 50-50. And what you can see is that by far, people prefer charity B. And charity B is the one where people, out of the donation of $1,000, only $100 goes to advertising, which is really interesting. How is this related to effective altruism? Why is this interesting? Because the question to ask here, which of those is more effective? And if you just reframe that distinction between charity A and charity B, if you take away the advertising, actually what is left is that charity A was able to do more with just $800 compared to charity B that required $900. So let's say next year, no need for advertising because both of the charities are famous. Then it seems like charity A is actually the more effective one of those. But people have an aversion to putting their money into something like advertising, which is very peculiar. So when we focus on effectiveness and we just reframe the same question into what is left and how much they're able to do with what's left, then we realize it's actually not charity B that we should be focused on, but charity A. So you can see this very large bias towards charity B. And if we're able to reframe this ideas to people, maybe they'll shift their preference to charity A. So how about if we change advertising to overhead? So overhead has to do with the admin stuff, the management. It seems like when we have 200 spent on overhead and 100 spent on overhead, it seems like people really don't want the donations to go to management and overhead. What is the problem with this? So here also we found not as big of a bias, but we found some bias towards the charity B. But then there's a problem with this because sometimes overhead can be something that can really help the charity do a lot better, but people really don't want their money to go to managers. What they envision usually is managers having massages and having, booze after hours. And the question that we have both for advertising and for overhead is that, is there a way out? Is there a way to explain to people that actually the more effective charity could be the one, the charity A that spends more on overhead or is more effective if you take away the advertising? Is there a way out? So here is a reframing. So we've tried many different versions of this in order to understand how people look at this. And here we have charities A and B. Both help thousands of children. Both of them spend 50% of their donations on administrative costs. So there's no difference between charity A and charity B. Both of them invest exactly the same. But in charity A, for every $100 donation that you give, 50 goes for the children and 50 goes for administrative bureaucracy and all of that. But then there's charity B. And in charity B, for a $100 donation, everything goes to the charity, but somebody else pays for the overhead. So people feel it's exactly the same, charity A and charity B, but you feel like your donation actually is what's doing the good. And somebody else out there is taking care of the overhead, okay? So there is a way out of this. So we were not the first to find this out. Our suggestion is you find an external donor to cover admin and promotion. So it's easy for us to go to Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, and tell them, actually, we want you to be boosters. You take care of all the overhead and the advertising. And then people will donate more because they think that their money is the one that's going to make the real change. So if you can find somebody from the outside to take care of overhead advertising, actually you can really boost the donations to your charity. And this is supported by a big article that came out in 2014 in Science. So in Science, this is a big journal for us. We dream of publishing something like Science. And what they did was they ran an experiment just like ours, hypothetical scenarios, but they also ran this in a field experiment. So with real donations, with real charities, where they asked somebody from the outside to take care of the overhead. And you can see the boost is actually very, very large. So in the control condition, the regular donations are something like just below 10,000. If you tell them something about, there's a matching, so for every one of your donations, it will match this, or there's a seed funding to boost the charity, it adds a little bit, so it increases about 50%. But if you tell them that all the overhead and bureaucracy, all the advertising has been taken care of by external donor, then people just are willing to give 2.5 times more. So very impressive boost to charity if you just take away all this thing with the overhead. They also did a bunch of things here, just by simple reframing, showing a big boost, a big increase from not taken care of, not covered, to covered by an external donor. Then there's also a big collaboration, so we do in open science a lot of replications, and a big team tried to replicate the lab studies, and indeed they found a successful replication. So there's consistent support throughout the years, both in the lab a few times and in the field, to show that if we take care of overhead, if it's covered, then we can boost the donations up to 2.5 times more. So in people's minds, this seems to be something that's very, very important. How about anonymity? So when you think about this, would you rather stay anonymous, or would you rather have your name on a website and how much you donated? So my inclination whenever I see something like this is that I don't want people to know. But our hypothesis was that most of the people would want their names on the website because it brings reputation, right? It's a signal that you're doing some good in the world. But to our great surprise, it actually seems like most of the people, some of them it's like, it doesn't matter, like half-half. Some of them are like, we want. But most of the people, when they had a preference between charity A and charity B, they actually preferred the anonymous donation, which we went completely contrary to our prediction. So charity B that keeps donors anonymous seems to be the winner in this kind of scenario. So the question is this effective or ineffective? And using the effective altruism paradigm, actually anonymity is much less effective than if you publicize everything, because you've got setting yourself as an example. So if one person donates effectively, then it gets other people to follow in their path, especially if they're influencers or they have a large following. Sharing information, so maybe some people didn't know about this information. If you donate anonymously, then nobody will ever know, not just about your donation, but in general about that charity. Just all this together, encouraging more people to seek out information and donate to that charity. So these are things that I did with Mannix, and it was a nice little exercise, but as we finished these, so he had like 7 different factors, and then when we finished this, I thought, this is too slow, this is too narrow, so we can tackle one factor at a time, but we would rather go large scale. So because I have experience with large team science and I want to scale things up, then I was looking for a way to identify a lot of factors and scale this up to identifying many factors at the same time. So this is the kind of thing that I try and promote when I go around the world and I talk to different people. In the first conference about big team science in 2022, where I pitched the idea of leveraging the classroom, undergraduates, to do large team science. And this is indeed what I've done this year. So I completely revamped, I teach advanced social psychology. So I changed the entire course in order to do more good, doing good better. And basically I asked them to do exactly what Mannix did, but to find new factors, to identify new things where they can compare different charities. So I gave them 2 projects. The first one is to find different factors. So you need to construct an experiment like that. So we can contrast 2 different charities and then see whether people go in a certain direction and whether it meets our expectations or not. Does this reflect a bias or not? And then what they're doing now, as they're finishing the semester, it ends next week, is after we have insights, can we build a real charity based on that? So to train undergraduates, 19, 20 years old, to build a charity, to design something that does good. So we had 12 teams. We finished this a couple of weeks ago. We had 12 teams. They identified about 90 plus different factors. We did real data collection, so after they designed the experiments, I went online, used an online labor market where I gave real people these kind of scenarios, which one they prefer, charity A, charity B. They wrote a real academic article, and they designed, they analyzed, they discussed everything. And I wanted them to make this as close as possible to real-life implications so that they can use this in their second task. So we've done a bunch of those. All sorts of different things. You can't read this, but it doesn't really matter, just to show you the scope and scale of all sorts of things that they've done. And finally, this Google sheet, we just try to map out which are the strongest effects. From the strongest effect here, going all the way down. So what's this supported, not supported, and all that. I'll just tell you. But on the top here, what all these small ones, it says risk aversion. So it just seems that people are very, very risk averse. They want certainty. So if you give them one charity that is very certain, for sure will save one child. Or you give them another charity that will say, there's a 1% chance of saving 100 children. Which one would you prefer? So the net child saved is the same, it's one child, but people would much rather say, I want to save the one child. And this is a very strong effect. So in terms of numbers, actually in psychology, we very rarely see these kinds of effect sizes, and effect sizes are very, very large. So I think this is a demonstration of all the cool things that we can do with undergraduates in real life, in class, as they design and try to map out factors, and then to compare between them, which are the strongest factors. So if I am to design a charity, what should I take into account? And as far as I know, this is the largest scale of such comparison between different charities and different factors. I'll just try and summarize this for you. I don't know how much you can see of that, but very strong risk aversion. People would prefer to go for things that are neglected, and this matches effective altruism. So in effective altruism, there are many different causes, and you would like to go and contribute to things that have not been addressed so far. So neglectedness seems to be something that people also care about. People want information and transparency, so if you have one charity that shares everything and one charity that does not, they prefer the one that has transparency. However, they don't want to invest any effort in looking at that information. So they want experts to actually tell them what it is that they need to do, but they want the information available for the experts in order to make that decision. There's also a lot of biases, and I think we all understand these biases. So, me, biased, I want important for me, my family, my city, my country, all that. So in-group versus out-group, me. So we have a lot of things that have to do with personal connection. Also, me has to do with I'm human, therefore I care more about humans than I do animals. And we play with a lot of things, like 1% versus 1,000 endangered animals. So it just seems like the bias for humans is so strong. And then also compare this to things in nature, like trees that are not animals. But the in-group about membership, shared beliefs, religion, because the sample is from the US, religion is so strong. And just general the shared background between all of that. Some of the stuff that we found a little bit surprising against our predictions has to do with people prefer the less popular. So we predicted that people would go where everybody else is going, but it seems like there's actually a strong preference for saying, if everybody is going there, I would rather focus on something that's less familiar, less popular. So we're still a little confused about that. We also thought that people would prefer remedy over preventiveness because there are already a lot of problems in the world. People are starving, people have health issues in Africa. So we thought people would want to address that first, but it seems like people would rather put their money in something that's preventing problems in the future for others. And then people just care about fairness more than they do about helping those who are disadvantaged. So for example, when we had a choice between one charity cares about all children and tries to support them equally, and one is just focused on orphans, and people just prefer the one that goes to all children. So for us, that was surprising. So this is all really good fun. Great. So we ran some charities and comparisons, and the students did some stuff. is this really helpful? Can we do something with this? So the inspiration for taking this to the next stage, to the next level, to really doing something impactful, comes with an example of two social psychologists from the US who I know and I work with. They also have a Slack channel that you can join of Psychology of Effective Altruism. And it's this one. It's called Giving Multiplier. Have you heard of this? No? Okay. So I'll just play for you. I hope I can do that. I'll play for you like a short video of less than a minute to explain what this is and how that works. And then I'll try and show you what that looks like in reality.
You want to do something good. Perhaps a donation to a charity? But which one? You want to give in a way that's personally meaningful, a charity that speaks to your heart. But giving isn't just about your feelings. You also want your money to do as much good as possible. Charity experts do research to find the most effective charities. Most people don't know this, but the world's most effective charities are hundreds of times more effective than typical charities. They save many more lives and improve people's lives much more. For example, this charity can cure a child in Kenya infected with parasitic worms for just 66 cents. This reduces children's suffering and allows them to go to school again. That's incredibly effective. But perhaps you don't feel a personal connection to this charity. What should you do? Giving Multiplier offers a simple solution. Divide your donation between a charity you love and a super effective charity recommended by experts. Even better, Giving Multiplier will multiply your impact by adding to both donations. Try it out. Make a donation at givingmultiplier.org.
So it's a very simple idea. If you look at the website, it's very easy to set that thing up. And once you look at the actual interface, I hope I can open this. Can you see? Yeah, this is what it looks like. How it works is very, very simple. So you go here and you say, what is your favorite charity? So let's say, I don't know, something with the children, so a child, Save the Children, for example, is something that I really care about. You know, when I donate to Save the Children, it gives me this personal feeling of glow. So once we have this over here, it also tells me, can you please select another super effective charity? So these are some of the most effective charities in the world ranked by experts from GiveWell. So for example, New Incentives gives cash to parents who vaccinate their kids, and vaccinations are very effective. Some of them lack that. So let's say, for example, I want New Incentives, and it gives me some information about those super effective charities. And then this is where the magic happens. I can say I want to donate $100 US. It gives me a choice of how much do you want to donate to your personal warm glow charity, and how much are you willing to donate to New Incentives. And the thing is, the more you donate to the more effective charity, the more they will match it. So the matching rate here is 40%, but if I increase this rate, so for example 80%, then they will match 64%. So the higher you give to the effective charity, the more that they will match it. If you only give 10%, then your matching rate is 8. So what they found is that in order to get this warm glow, people don't need to donate all of their money 100%. It's enough sometimes for them to give 10% or give 50%. And this way they can change in order for you to, instead of, let's say, donating $100 US going all to Save the Children, they can take 50% or 90% of that and get you to donate that to the more effective charities, and then you can see how much more good you've done. So if you give, let's say, we do 50-50, so you can get, in addition to the personal warm glow of I donated to something that I care about, you can see how much they've added, so the matching, and then you can see that the amount was a booster, so 40% more than what you actually gave in, because there's matching. And it's beautiful because they have this mechanism that actually allows, some people really like to be boosters. So if you explain this mechanism to them and you say, you can get other people to donate more effectively, would you like to be a booster? And then some people get the warm glow from their personal charity, they get the warm glow from the additional boost that they got from the community, and also get the warm glow from helping and boosting other people. So it's kind of like passing on the good in the world. So very, very interesting concept. And all of this is based, so Lucius and Joshua Green are two psychologists. Lucius started this as a PhD, now he's a postdoc, and started this. And they started a whole literature in psychology about the psychology of ineffective altruism, trying to identify why do people go for the personal blow, even though it could be less effective, just like we've seen with the overhead and with the advertising. So it seems like the start for this whole ineffective altruism has to do with people much prefer the emotional aspect of this. This makes me feel good, over does this really lead to higher effectiveness? People have also personal preferences, so I care more about Hong Kong than I care about those people in South America and in Africa. So they started this, but they kept on going with this, identifying all kinds of different challenges. So the first thing is like, why do people do this? Do they lack information about effectiveness, or is it that they lack the motivation? So it's both. First, they show that people vastly underestimate the difference in effectiveness. So when you ask them, so what is the difference between the least effective and the most effective? They will say maybe it's double, maybe 3 times more. But actually the differences between the charities could be up to 100 times more. Then they mapped out, is it about information or is it about motivation? So it seems to be about both of those. And this is kind of like a summary of all the big aspects of the psychological literature around ineffective giving. People estimate this to be about double, but it's actually 10 times to 100 times more. Only 3% give based on effectiveness, so this is a real problem. And only a third of people actually do any research. And the people who do research, what they do is that they just go on a charity's website, or they ask their family rather than do serious research on this. So this Giving Multiplier really leverages a lot of insights that we have in psychological science. In the beginning, when they set up this charity, they thought maybe we'll get around $50,000 a year, but they've arrived at millions already, and it's only running for 2 years. I think also the brand of Harvard maybe helped to boost this, and it went viral very fast, but now it's one of the most effective charities because it really takes money that people would donate to something that they personally care about, to something that really helps boost the most effective charities in the world. How much of a boost? They have a bunch of papers, and this is the paper that just came now from 2023 to somewhere as Giving Multiplier, so they have hard data from 2 years. How much is the boost? So just bundling the personal preferences and the effective charities, bundling these together leads to 76% boost. And if you also introduce matching to the effective ones, to the higher the rate for effective ones, the more that they will match, then you can get a boost of another 55% on top of that. So they ran some randomized controlled trials. They also compare this to other things. So they compare this not only to the most effective ones, but to the most popular ones. So would people prefer maybe to go to the most popular ones rather than most effective ones? So they did all sorts of different trials, and they came to the conclusion that the most successful one is having the effectiveness factor in there. So I really like this. So I was trying to build something like this with my students. So starting from last year, I was trying to leverage everything that we know from psychological science in order to try and understand how we can build something similar in order to boost effectiveness overall. And there are also some aspects that I really like about effective altruism that remind me a little bit of the open science community. So we care very much about transparency, openness, everything is documented, everything is clear, no secrets. We also ask people to attack us. So when we make everything transparent, we ask people to check whether we need improvement. So GiveWell and us, we pay you if you find mistakes, if you have a good recommendation on how to improve, we give you cash. Or if you want, instead of cash, if you donate this to charity, we will match it. So I give double if people decide to donate this to something like GiveWell. So all these aspects of effective altruism are very much in line with our aspects of open science. So we do a bunch of listings. I'm not going to go into this. Yeah. So in our team, with the students, I've tried to map out as many of cognitive biases that might lead people away from effectiveness. What could lead people to not donate effectively. So we've got Josh Green and Lucius Capiola with Giving Multiplier. They've done some good. What have we identified? And we've done a lot of replications. We finished a very large-scale project, and we've identified all sorts of things. I will give you just a very quick taste of two of those. This is an example. Those who are familiar with effective altruism, I'll just ask for your patience for a second. This is Peter Singer. If you're not familiar with effective altruism, these are two great books that you can read from Peter Singer. He also has a really nice TED Talk where he talks about the life you can save, the most good that you can do. And he's a philosopher. He's been acting, he's been around since the 1970s, and he gives this dilemma. And this is a very famous, the girl in the pond. So you're walking next to the harbor, and you saw this little girl falling into the harbor, but you're on the way to an interview and you're wearing a $1,000 suit. Would you jump in and save that girl, thereby ruining your suit and being late for that meeting? So when you present this to my students or to any person, 95+% say, of course I will jump to save the girl. If I can swim, I will do my best in order to save the little girl. And of course, the next stage, Peter Singer, is a philosophical hypothetical, says, well, right now, there are lots of girls that are drowning all around the world that need your donation. So why this little girl drowning in the harbor, you're willing to give up $1,000 and be late for a meeting, but you're not willing to right now stop everything that you're doing, take off your suit, give this to, get some money, and then send this to the little girl in South America that is drowning just by the fact that she was born in poverty. And this is the famous quote from his book. So right now, there's 5.4 million children under 5 years old, 2017. A majority of deaths from preventable, treatable causes. And then take this as an example, the death of this small boy. This morning, for example, the boy died of measles. We all know that could have been cured at the hospital, but the parents had no money. And so the boy died a slow and painful death, not of measles, but out of poverty. Peter Singer asks, so what is going on here? Why is this happening? So we study these psychological factors. We try and understand why do people not act. What's the difference between these two girls, the one that's just next to you and the one that's far away? So I study a lot action and inaction, why we fail to act. So it could be global warming, it could be about helping others, poverty, it could be things like during the pandemic, why people don't act in order to, let's say, vaccinate their kids. So we completed this large-scale systematic review of everything regarding what is called omission bias. And the main conclusion from this is that our morality, in our minds, it's okay to do harm through inaction. Just me not acting and being here in Hong Kong and not doing anything is not as immoral as me actually causing harm through action. So this is like one of the main paradigms. The way that this was studied originally in the US is that parents would rather not vaccinate their kids, because if they vaccinate their kids and there are side effects, they are the ones that cause the harm. But if they don't vaccinate their kids, but back then it was the flu, if the flu gets them and they get sick, then it's not them, they did not cause the harm. The harm was caused by the virus or the pandemic. Right? So a lot of implications also for the pandemic we just came out from. We also ran a very similar scenario, also in comparison between charity A and charity B. So for example, we played with the effectiveness of the vaccination. So here we have a well-tested vaccination with 95% effectiveness that cures 95 out of 100. But there's a possibility of 5 out of 100 getting side effects. A possibility, not a certainty. And then we have 90% effectiveness, but no side effects. So charity A is actually more effective and is saving more lives, potentially, than charity B. So charity A is at least as good as charity B, if not much better. But the preference in these kinds of cases is very, very strong towards no side effects, even if the effectiveness is much lower, which is very curious. But we've seen this happen. We've seen this all the time during the pandemic, especially with this crowd in the US. So it keeps coming up all the time. So this ties back to what Peter Singer was saying. Does it really matter that we didn't inflict the harm, that we just not acted? If we sit by do nothing when we can stop the harm from happening? That's one question that comes up. Another research direction that we have is indirect harm. So it seems like, summarizing this whole thing that we ran with the students, indirect harm seems to be more moral than direct harm. So if there's just an additional one step that causes things to not go directly and cause the harm, but indirectly, so it's not that I'm causing harm by harming the kids in, let's say, South America, but I'm just taking the trees from my paper or doing something indirectly that causes them the harm, then I'm not responsible. It's not me. I just needed the paper. Or I just needed those trees in order to sustain the global economy. But indirect harm just like allows me to feel better with myself, but the harm is still exactly the same. Does it really matter that we didn't inflict the harm directly and what we contribute to it indirectly? So to summarize these two examples, we have a lot more of those, of things that I've done with the students. Very important topic. It seems like there's not much about this. We can leverage our work with the students in order to understand this a little bit better. And there's some really important insights, because once we understand the psychological factors, perhaps there's a way for us to address this in order to balance things out, so that there wouldn't be an omission bias, there wouldn't be preference for indirect harm. Just to kind of wrap up this whole thing, what is this core team? So in the description, there was something very vague about large science, how to collaborate around the world and all of that. This is all to say that I try to leverage what I do at HKU in order to bridge teaching and mentoring with large team science together with the global community. So rather than me just standing in front of the classroom, a little bit like I'm doing here with you, and telling the students, this is what you must do, this is what science says, I just invite them on a journey where we sit down and we think together of what are the challenges, what kind of experiments can we do. We run the experiments on ourselves, a little bit like what I try to do with a Mentimeter, and then we run this on real participants online, and we try to inform the academic community and effective altruists about some of these factors to help them do more in real life. Some examples of things that we've done last year, we actually wrote books for effective altruism. So each student group got a small chapter about some domains. So effective altruism deals with a lot of things, from health and poverty all the way to existential threats, even AI risks. So very broad domains. So each one of these groups was supposed to tackle one domain. So if you want to know about these domains, there was no one resource that summarized all of that. So HKU students did all that. You can see like 200 pages, 170 pages. So a lot of resources. So together with the power of collaboration, they were able to do this within one semester. We also play giving games. Have you played this here? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. So there are some charities in effective altruism that give you real money. So for every student in my classes, they give us $10 US. And then we give this money to the students and we say, please choose which charity to donate this to. And in this case, for example, we gave them a choice between Carbon 180, New Incentives, or Wild Animal Initiative. I said, which one would you donate to? What does your gut reaction tell you? And then we put them in groups and we have them discuss this, and we try to map this according to all sorts of psychological principles. And then we can see whether overcoming some of these cognitive biases gets them to donate to a different charity. And finally, they make a decision. We make the donation in their names. So these are like the certificates of what the Hong Kong University students did. So I'm guessing you did something very similar to that, right? And I increase the complexity every time. So students last year had to choose between 3 charities. Students this year had to choose between 7 charities. So they had to do some more mapping of cognitive factors and then see how like which one of them is more important, and we made a donation based on this. And finally, this large team collaborative initiative that we have around the world is that we have around 40 early career researchers, so I spend a lot of my time every year going around the world and trying to give workshops on how to do psychological science and how to do open science and how to do more effective altruism. So by now we have many people from all places around the world, and they're working together with our students. So even now, when we completed the semester, many people came in, so I post on Twitter, please come and join our students in designing experiments, in trying to design new charities. So it's a collaborative thing that happens on Google Docs online. So if you follow me on Twitter or you see some of the activities that we have on the mailing list, you'll be able to catch this in time in order to take part in this. So we've completed over the last 5 years a lot of these studies, a lot of guides and templates. And finally, one of the questions can undergraduates really have something of impact? So the answer to this by now is a big yes. So all of these are articles that came out from all the stuff that I do with the students. So of course they're co-authors, they lead these publications. It goes into academic articles, the community benefits from this, and then finally the next stage is building on that in order to construct real charities that do some good in the world. So this was 2021, 2022, 2023. So the students are, if you engage with them in the right way, if you build a course situation at the university where they can contribute, they are really able to lead to impact and a lot of outputs. So if you want to join us, there's also to do if you want to work with our students, if you want to learn more about what we're doing. So this is the main link. There's also a mailing list. There's lots of things that you can do. There's lots of ways to work with us. Today was just like a teaser of some of the activities that we have, but there's a lot more going on in the background, and there's going to be more in the upcoming year. That was very fast, very simple. Yeah, thanks for bearing with me. But if you want to know about any of the things that I mentioned today, actually everything is on my website. So I try to share as much as possible. All of the projects that I mentioned are on there. If there's something that you want to follow up on or something that you want to communicate with me directly, if there's a specific project that you want to work with us on, if you want to see what the students are doing in designing charities, then we're happy to work with you and hear from you. So this is my email for all the activities, about all the talks and all the things that we do in the team. You can sign up on this mailing list over here. So that's it from me.
Dr. Gilad Feldman, thank you so much. That was really interesting, really great. So in terms of our plan here, are you able to go with Q&A a little bit? I know John, we've had the talk until 8:30, and then we have pieces on the way, in 20 minutes or so.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to do whatever people would like.
I'll be greedy and start the first question. It seems from sort of the way the course is structured that many of the students are going into it from a psychological study perspective, right? And it's about the methodology predominantly. How did their perspectives on effective altruism grow or change over time by using this method? So I mean, obviously there's the method in being good in producing research in its own right. But do you think that helped them engage with the actual content more than they would have otherwise?
There are a few aspects to each course. So they have a self-learning component, they have all these collaborative teams, and there's the research project. So here I was focused on the research project. But before they actually engage in the research projects, they do a lot of self-exploration about effective altruism. So they have readings, and there's 5 different readings. The first one is an academic article, the second one is like a book chapter, the third one is like a podcast, and also there's games and TED Talks, and so they go through all of these. And within a team, each one of them does a different one, and then they need to do like discussions and to integrate this together for this to be able to inform what it is that they're doing in their exercise. So I think starting from the readings, they come into the classroom where I present more content. So we start with moralities. We start with the little girl drowning in the pond. Then we go into things like the trolley dilemmas. So there's a trolley racing down the track and can run over 5 people, but you can lift the lever and then it goes to the 1%. So we play with a lot of these scenarios. We debate this. I present them with a scenario, they make predictions. I then show them what it is that they've done, then we analyze this together, and then we decide what it is that we would like to explore more. So every one of these components of things that they do, the readings, the tasks, the in-class experiments that we run on ourselves in the classroom, all are supposed to kind of elicit the interest in effective altruism. And I think very fast, after a month or so, the first month they're completely clueless. So what is this effective altruism? Why is this important? We came to an advanced social psychology course. Why is all this philosophical stuff? Why is this important for us to know this? But I think after 1 month, suddenly you get students who have watched more than what you assigned them to. And they, I don't know if they've attended your meetings, but they go to all sorts of forums online where they can seek out information about effective altruism. And then the class engagement is a lot nicer because they bring some of their own knowledge. And then we can get the discussion going to a much higher level. It also informs their tasks. So I've actually learned a lot from them. So all these factors, the very big list that you didn't see, of all the things that they've identified, they went, seeked out information, and constructed an experiment. So my feeling is that I've not tested this, but I do have beginning of the course, midterm, and end of course evaluations, where I ask them for feedback about how they're feeling about all sorts of topics, including effective altruism. And it seems like their interest is boosted from just being in the classroom. I think also to negate a little bit the good in that, some of them also feel a little bit overwhelmed. So perhaps in effective altruism, you feel that a little bit. Some of them are just, why do you carry that burden? I just want to, do the good that I do. I already contribute to charity. Why do I need a paradigm of effective altruism? So we have some of these discussions. The burden of, does that mean that right now I need to donate all of my salary to charity? Do I need to live like Peter Singer or all the effective altruists? But these are good discussions to have. So there is more interest, but I also feel that they also have more burden. It's not just them, I also feel this myself. It's like after going into effective altruism, there were a lot of things that I didn't think about. So I got into this because of the pandemic, but now I'm just worried about a lot of things in the world. And the exposure to this information just is a little bit too much sometimes, where you just want to shut things down and not think about it. Running all these experiments sounds like a small, fun exercise, but after this, you feel the burden. And at some point, you need to decide, where do you draw the line? So I try to protect my students a little bit by doing all that. One of the last sessions, the session that we're doing next week, I try and sit together with them, so rather than us doing this in the traditional way, I sit down with them and I try to get them to open up about, so what did you go through, how is this affecting you, what do you think about your own future and your own careers, what would you like to share? And I think it just helps talking about this. So it's not just about informing people about effective altruism, or how do we boost, how do we optimize, how do we focus on the most good. It's also about how do we still live good, healthy, well-balanced life while trying to do all that good. But it's interesting to see the journey that the students go through, and with them the journey that I go through. So, still a lot to go.
Any questions from the audience?
Okay.
I'm just wondering, how do you compare the effectiveness of different charities at completely different starting points and serve completely different beneficiaries? And is the effectiveness measured over a year or years? How is that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so it's a good question because I was also curious about this. So, for example, GiveWell, they compare very different charities from very different domains, but somehow at the end they're able to capture just how effective something is compared to a different charity. So one of the exercises that we did last year that I was able to learn from is that GiveWell actually runs an annual contest where they open everything up and they show their methodology and they ask people to come and evaluate this and try to improve that. So the task to the students was learn what GiveWell is doing, understand how it is that they're doing this, and try to improve as if we're submitting to GiveWell that kind of feedback. The nice thing about GiveWell is that actually they give money for this, so just like any submission you get $500 and the big winners get around $30,000. So they really aim to learn from that, and every year they show how they've improved. So through this task, I was able to understand how GiveWell is doing this. It's not the only one, there's lots of fintechs. So what they're trying to look at is something that's called a DALI, which is a unit. So per dollar spent, how many lives or quality of lives saved overall. So everything, even when we talk about things that are very long-term or very risky, they try and quantify this. There are very elaborate Google Sheets, Excels, that try and transform everything that the charity does to the impact. And next to that number, there are lots of sources of information from randomized control trials or from people that are in the field, trying to quantify everything. The way that GiveWell started was by hedge fund managers that had very high success. They had hundreds of millions of dollars. And they're like, we want to do the most good with this. How do we know where to invest this? So one of the things that they did, they picked up the phone and they were calling charities. Can you please tell me, if I give you $1 million US, what are you going to do with this? And most charities didn't have any answers, because this is something that you would expect from an organization, a for-profit organization, but charities just don't know how to talk about these kind of things. What do you mean? We're the Red Cross. Just trust us. Give us the money. So one of the things that GiveWell does is not only to try and quantify this, but also give charities the tools how to quantify what it is that they're doing. So they're using a lot of tools. So one of them is just these very elaborate Google Sheets trying to quantify per dollar spent, where does it go, how much is the overhead, the advertising, how much actually does things at the end. But sometimes you have different charities altogether that look at the very long term. So existential threats. How do we know what is the threat of nuclear weapons or war or a pandemic? So this is where effective altruism becomes very innovative. And this is also related to some of the other things that we do in social psychology about how to predict, how to forecast. So how do we know what is the probability of something happening? So there are prediction markets. We set up prediction markets. There's one very good one that a lot of effective altruists do. And then you write down what is it that you want your prediction on. So what is the, let's say, for example, the elections in the US, who is going to win in these elections, what's going to happen, and then you've got a lot of different people trying to bet on making predictions. And over time, you're able to identify, it's a whole subfield of social psychology, who are the super forecasters. And based on them, you're able to see, based on the super forecasters and aggregation of all of those, what are the chances. So you quantify, for example, if I have a charity that looks at existential threats, and perhaps it looks at the threat of a nuclear war, this number of deaths, this is what might happen to humanity, but the chances are X. We don't know what this X is. So we put this on a super forecasting platform, we try to get some numbers, and then we input all of that into the Google Sheets. So we moved from at the beginning, 15 years ago, having no quantification, having no way of predicting the future, knowing absolutely nothing about what is the impact of charities and what we do, to a situation where actually we are getting better and better information. We're running more randomized control trials, we're making more forecasts and prediction, and now we're trying to balance these together in order to see how to compare between those. In addition to this, we're also trying to look at factors like neglectedness. So for example, if everybody is focused on health and poverty, but maybe there's a risk of this AI coming, taking over and dominating the world. So what is this risk? Is this going up? Is it going down? So I think what's nice about the effective altruism paradigm is it's very scientific. It gives us tools to quantify, think about things, discuss them, and improve them over time so that we can make these comparisons. I think if you're interested in this, the best way to do this, because all of the top charities like GiveWell, Open Philanthropy, Funders Pledge, all of them have open Excels, open Google Sheets where they share all this information. So it's a really nice exercise to try and go there, learn from them, see how it is that they do this, and also implement this for whatever it is that you care about. Long answer.
So you mentioned there's a sort of practical side of part 2 of the project where you encourage students to actually start to design and create some charity. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It's in process, so I don't know how this is going to unfold. We had the first session this week where I was trying to get them to discuss how to build these charities, how to think about these charities, and they took this in a lot of unexpected directions. I don't really know what's going to come out of that, but I built a template where I tried to get them to first analyze giving multiplier. So let's say you could improve giving multiplier. How would you build giving multiplier 2.0? Or what kind of randomized control trials would you recommend that they do? And then based on all the readings and all the tasks and all the factors that we have for the first task, what would you like to build yourself? So it would be like a real charity that does something not just online but also in person. It remains to be seen. It's exploratory, so I can just say this. So far, every time that I gave something to the students, they far surpassed my expectations. So I had like expectations here. I thought, okay, it's just an exercise. I'll learn something through them. But I'm actually like some of them are quite clever, and I already know one. Maybe she already came to some of your meetings, but I already know one of them has already started a charity. Many of them come from psychology, so they care about mental health. So there's a whole domain in effective altruism that tries to also quantify, so does therapy or coaching, does that work? How much of an increase does this give to people's quality of life? Should we just look at life saved, or should we also look at quality of life, of how much we've boosted the quality of life for a person? So some people, like some of the feedback to GiveWell is maybe not just the number of years life saved, but also about the quality and mental health. So the students like bring this into all sorts of different directions. So we'll see like in a couple of weeks how this would work. I'm really hoping that at least some of them would consider this to be like a direction